Good afternoon. Today is February 10th, 2026, and this is the study session for the City of Prescott. This meeting is now called to order. Roll call.
Mayor Rusing,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Fruworth,
Nasty late child is here.
Councilwoman Frederickson,
Here.
Councilman Gambogi,
I am here.
Councilman Grady,
Here.
Councilman Ruby,
Here.
and the record will reflect that Councilman Gehring is excused from the meeting.
Next item.
Presentation and discussion regarding the City of Prescott Special Events Funding Policy.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of City Council. I'm Mike Morris, I'm the Deputy City Manager. Today we'd like to have a discussion about special events funding policy. So what is the purpose for this policy? As you know, we've had some inconsistency in how some larger events have been funded in the past. So the whole purpose of this is to bring a straightforward, accountable process for funding events that enables us to manage them properly and use public resources effectively, cost-effectively, and well-coordinated way. And so we've developed this, and so we would be glad to take your feedback as we work through it. So just for background, what we're talking about here, these are event tiers. There's 3 signature events that most of this funding is really geared towards. As we get through this, you'll see that. But all those are in this Tier A category. They're all large events. And so that's the purpose for showing you this slide, is that what we're really talking about today are these larger events. There are other processes that cover most of the smaller events, and we'll touch on that as well. So in the policy that we've created, and the document, it was in your packet, is we've identified city events or city-produced events, and those are funded within the city's general fund. And there's such, well, we'll talk about what those are here in just a second. Then there's, let me go back. Then there's, I went the wrong way. Oops, I'm hitting the wrong button. There we go. Sorry about that. City marketing sponsorship, which uses tourism dollars and helps build our city brand. And then we have our Tourism Advisory Committee grants, and so we'll talk about all 3 of these. So what are these city-produced events? So these are, as it says here, coordinated by or contracted by the city. The 2 classic examples are the 4th of July and the Veterans Day Parade. Those are the 2 biggest, but the city does some other events as well. And those are within the city operating budget, and they're not eligible for tourism tax because they are community events. They don't draw tourists. So the next category is the city marketing sponsorship events. And so these are larger events, as I mentioned. They're generally coordinated by not the city, it's a nonprofit or some other entity. In this case, we're saying to be eligible for this funding, you need to generate at least $100,000 in tourism sales tax. You need to have at least 5,000 attendees from outside our Prescott area, which we define as 90 miles away or more. And it has a marketing reach of at least 1 million impressions. So again, going to marketing, how are we building our brand? We want to make sure that these events have these impressions that build our brand. And so the 3 classic, or the 3 that are in this category, are Christmas City, Whiskey Off-Road, and the Prescott Rodeo.
Mike, I have a question. What about Acker Night? Does that meet the criteria?
Acker Night would probably not meet this criteria. I believe it is funded.
Acker Night is part of the Christmas City
Christmas City.
event,
Yeah.
so
It's under the
Acker Night.
bigger umbrella.
All right. Okay,
So
thanks.
The boot drop, Acker Night, and Light Parade.
And the courthouse lighting and the Christmas parade.
Are there any other events that may be getting close to that level?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Patrick, did you have something to say?
Yes, real quick, Mike, thank you. So this that we're going through today, this is proposed eligibility? Is this building off an older policy?
We had no policy for funding these events, so this is a new policy for funding. We have a special events policy that oversees all special events, and it's more about permitting of events, but we did not have a policy on funding.
Yeah.
I'll add one caveat to that. The TAC did have a funding procedure and policy for smaller events, and we'll talk about that in just a second.
Mayor,
Mary?
thank you. It just popped into my mind when Jay mentioned any others. There was and I'm not sure I have the name correctly, the Imagination at Watson Lake.
Correct.
And it seems to me, reported in the press anyway, there was talk of whether or not the city should contribute to that. I mean, that's put on by a private entity, I believe a for-profit entity, but is that not in the scope of what we're speaking of right now?
Yeah, actually, they received $11,000 from the city, tourism dollars, and I believe it went through TAC. Is that correct? Yes.
That went through TAC? Mm-hmm. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
So as we talked about yes.
Lois?
So these we're talking about right now, you had a slide earlier. This is Tier A.
Tier A. This is
That's what we should have on this, is that we're talking the eligibility and the funding for Tier A. Okay? Thank you.
Yep. And right now, the three events we've identified that meet these criteria are Christmas City and the events that are connected to it, Whiskey Off-Road and the rodeo. So we've developed a funding formula for these events. So based on this formula, the recipient would receive funding at an equivalent of 50% of the taxes generated, up to a maximum of $80,000 a year. This economic impact would be based on a study done, and we've contracted with ASU for these studies, and the study would be paid for half by the organizer and half by city out of tourism funding. And so that will give us our standardized baseline for each event of exactly what they're generating in economic impact and in tourism and sales tax.
Lois?
As this is a study session, I do think two things. One, I think we should put in the first bullet point, receive funding equivalent to 50% of City of Prescott taxes, because it's not counting county, it's not counting state. So just to be crystal clear, because so many people talk about the total tax revenue, and we can only fund out of what we bring into our coffers. So I want to say city taxes. And then the second one for me, I do think we should also add here, because everyone has their own economic impact study. So we need to say an outside contractor aligned between the city and the event, or preferably an outside contractor that the city specifies, however you want to do it. But I would just be crystal clear that we're not going to have dueling studies fighting against each
To
other.
be consistent, and that is identified in the actual policy document.
It is? Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Could you say what the cost of the economic impact study is?
Yes, they are generally right around $20,000, somewhere between 20 and 22, depending on the size of the event and et cetera, but
And so
Mayor?
that's per event assessed.
correct.
Mary?
Thank you. And you may be getting to this later on, but I'll ask my question now because it's staring me in the face. When we're speaking of an organization receiving funding equivalent to 50% of city taxes generated up to the 80,000 max, when is that distributed? Since we won't know how much city tax was generated until essentially after the fact, do they get some up front and some when they prove their worth on the back end? How does that work?
I'm glad you asked that question. That's the exact thing we're going to talk about right now, is what we're proposing is, and what the event organizers, they would like to have an extended contract. So what we're doing is, prior to creating a contract with these events, we would do the economic impact study to give us that exact dollar figure, and then they do a 5-year contract, and in the 4th year of the contract, we would do another one before we would renew, and it would update the next contract going forward.
So I'm sorry, so the economic impact report prior to the contract is based on modeling or past
No,
events?
they actually just did Christmas City. They'll be doing in April the Whiskey Off-Road, and in July they'll be doing the rodeo. And so we will then, in the next fiscal year that starts in July, we will be doing contracts based on those studies.
So to the extent that the economic impact study is undertaken before the contract is entered into, it is based on past events by that same promoter or organizer?
The studies will actually happen at this year's event. So it just happened at this past Christmas. So we will have a report back where it's due any time from Christmas City. And then we'll have all these reports back in time to do a contract in this upcoming fiscal year with each of these three.
And if it's a new organizer, a new event who's coming to the city, they want to put on this big, hoo-ha thing, but they don't have a track record, they don't have a past event to look back on, are we able to do some kind of economic impact study even though there's no track record?
We would require them to do one at their upcoming event before we would fund them.
Thank you.
Mr. Ruby?
And that funding off of one impact study then lasts for 5 years.
Correct.
So we don't do an economic impact study every year.
That's correct.
So if somebody starts to tank, we have no tracking.
Yeah, so there are variables in there. It could be bad weather one year. There could be a variety of different things that could happen. So the idea is that we would be for that 5-year period of that contract. Most of the events would like to have an escalation clause of some kind in it, but that's something we'll discuss when we get to actual contract. But yes,
Yeah.
you'd be correct.
I think that 5-year contract period is important because it gives them time to plan and get permits. For example, Epic Rides has to get permits from the U.S. Forest Service, and that takes time so they can plan ahead.
Also helps them build sponsorship in addition to ours. It helps them then build sponsorship as well if they have an extended contract. So I'd also like to mention that these events do receive in-kind services as well, which is, the police department, solid waste, just traffic barricades, a variety of different city services that they receive in kind. And all of these would require a report, and that'll be required in their contract that they provide us a report after their event. So just to give you some idea of what the impact could be, I do want to preface this by saying that you see in red there it says likely. That's because that's just based on the numbers they've given us in the past. Our economic impact study will define these exactly, but this is just based on some information they've given us in the past. We just wanted to give you some idea of what the impact likely could be. So for Christmas City, they currently receive $65,000 and then $40,000 in kind. So theirs would likely, based on what we know about them already, increase slightly, anywhere from $12,000 to $15,000. But again, that economic impact study we just did should be coming to us within a week or so, and we'll know exactly what that number will be. Whiskey Off-Road, based on the data they've given us in the past, theirs will likely stay about where it is right now. And then the rodeo, based on the data they've provided in the past, it would look like theirs might increase anywhere from $15,000 to $20,000. But again, that's once that economic impact study is done, we'll know exactly what that figure will be.
Yeah, I like this this policy where we have objective, factual data to base our funding decisions on, because in the past, somebody will get funded, 20,000. Next year they want 30. Next thing you're up to 50. So this gives us some data and some rationale to increase it or decrease it. Anyone else have a comment?
Yes, Mayor.
Yeah, Mary.
Looking at these three big signature type events, Christmas City and Whiskey Off-Road, you have them indicated here, both the split in the tax revenue and the in-kind. But for Prescott Rodeo, you just have the 40,000 figure. Is that the split of the tax revenue, or does that include in-kind as well?
That's just the tax revenue. In their case, they don't receive many of the other services that these events do. However, they do have a separate lease agreement, which would be considered in kind, I would believe, as well. So as you look at that, and we're talking about that separately, so I won't get into that one, but this is just the actual dollars, the 40,000. They don't ask for police help. They don't ask for security or other things the way that these other events do downtown.
At
Yeah,
the
we don't-
rodeo grounds, we don't provide police security? They provide their own?
They pay for their own. Mhm.
And we don't block off streets or anything like that.
So there may be some in-kind value.
We're performing some services, but they're paying for them, I guess is how I should reference that.
Thank you.
Yes.
Is there a specific reason for limiting it to 40,000 in kind?
Yes, that number is, we've looked at over the last 3 years, the number has been growing. And so last year it went over 40,000. And so we've tried to cap that number. It's continued to escalate. And so we feel it's important to cap that number as well so that it doesn't grow proportionally into the future.
And when it, let's say for some reason, like one of these events goes up to $70,000 in kind, is there a compensatory structure to recognize that? Do they then get less cash money?
Well, they would have to pay for any services over $40,000. So that is really about the big signature events and how this policy will affect them. I want to mention the TAC grants. The TAC grants have their own process that's been in place for many years. This policy does not change that. This policy is just identifying that that exists and that it will continue and it will follow the same structure it's always followed. But we want to make sure you understood that money does go there from tourism through the TAC. And so we wanted to include it here just so you had a good understanding that where is all this tourism money going?
Yeah, Mike, I have a question. Do you think this policy with these guardrails, do you think it's going to drive any of them away? Like Whiskey Off-Road?
No, we've had conversations
Okay.
with them.
As long as
in
they're
fact,
all aware.
We got an email, was it today, yesterday, that they're very supportive of the policy. And
Okay,
so they
good.
think it fits within their structure. And
Okay.
it's very similar to what they've received in the past. So there was no real apprehension, if you will.
Okay, great. Any other comments before we proceed? Okay, Lois?
Yeah, I liked what you said a few moments ago, that if they need to and want to go above 40,000 in city services, that they would have to pay for them. I just did not find that in the policy document itself. And I've been looking and I can't find it. So I would love that you add that into the policy so that everyone's clear.
Yeah.
It just says up to a maximum of 40,000 in-kind services. And I think there's like 3 bullet points and we should have, bullet point
Yeah.
D if they
We can
like
add that
more.
for clarity, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what's intended to mean is
Yeah.
a max of 40, but we'll add that anything over that.
Perfect.
Absolutely. Very good. So as again, you can see the TAC policy. They do a great job of administering this program. They put a lot of time and energy into it. All these TAC grants are between $1,000 and $5,000. And again, they require a report at the end of their event as well so that TAC will know exactly what happened during the event. So just a few things I want to touch on that apply to all events. This in no way exempts or changes the event policy that's in place, Section 8.9. You have to get a permit for all events. All events have to get permits if they're over a certain criteria. And so this doesn't change any of that. This is really about funding those signature events. All of them will have contracts. All the TAC grants have contracts. All of the items we've talked about here with those 3 large events will have to have contracts approved by City Council. All of them will be required to supply after-action reports of their event. And then all of them are subject to evaluation by the city, determining whether we want to continue them, whether it's through TAC or whether it's through our contract process. So with that, I'll see if there's any additional questions.
Your last statement, if you're considering discontinuing funding for an event, is there a way to let the elected officials know so that, maybe we might feel that maybe they should continue if we...
You would be heavily involved in that process, yes.
Okay. All righty. Thank you. We'd probably hear about it.
Yes.
Okay, Lois?
Yeah, I'm crystal clear on tier A. That's where we're going to sponsor, put our brands on things, et cetera, the big events. I'm crystal clear on tier C, because that all runs through tax. They make recommendations and we deliver it. But I'm not crystal clear on the difference of what does tier B mean in the policy.
These are those events that are in between. So some of the Bs are likely getting TAC grants. I'm trying to think of one off the top of my head, which is not working. But
How about the Veterans Parade?
well, that one's city
That's ours.
produced.
Yeah, okay.
So there are events that are not quite as big as these others. I'm trying to. Is there an event out there that would be in that category?
There are smaller events, smaller attendance events that TAC does fund, and also TAC grants fund.
John,
Yeah, I believe TAC grants would cover some of B and C, I guess is where I'm trying to get to.
Yeah. I mean, B, looking at it, B, it's generally, it is a smaller event. TAC grant funds events of, attendance wise from, 500 to, there's some events that have, 10,000 that are still getting TAC grants because they don't maybe meet the other criteria. But tier B is probably the least. It's really smaller. It's really big.
So that's the only thing
Yeah.
that strikes me is that the policy itself, the policy document, doesn't really talk about what's the difference for tier B and how do you work through negotiating that between TAC, city staff, and council. I'm just not clear at this moment how, and those would be like things I would imagine like when Pure Imagination was looking for more services, more funding, but they weren't quite coming to the numbers. And so I just think that's an opportunity to put some at least current policy framework around tier B, and so people can aspire to grow.
Yeah,
And we're all clear on how we're going to treat them. That's fair.
We can identify what's in B and C. I think most of those are being funded by TAC in both of those categories. What we were trying to demonstrate here is we were really trying to focus on the larger events with this funding policy because the rest are handled within TAC. And these are also the framework of our event permit process, determining a large event versus a medium event versus a smaller event.
Mr. Ruby?
I think the way that we define the tiers is really important, and I'd just like to make a suggestion is that we think of events as signature events, evolving events, and emerging events, and eventually develop a policy that has specific directions for how we can support each of those levels. And I would even go back to like the purpose in the original statement. It says provide a straightforward, accountable process for funding events and enable the city to manage public resources and events. I'm worried about the city managing events, and that's indicated in this language. I would like to see the word and cultivate events in a cost-effective and well-coordinated way, because I don't think the city wants to be managing all of these events, but I do think that the city wants to have a constructive relationship. And I think that by having, what this is the beginning of an objective standard for rewarding events, which I think encourages people. Prescott used to be like slap on the back and like, we like you, so you're going to get some support. We're getting becoming too big of a city for that. So this type of objective policy is going to be very helpful for people who want to do events that contribute to our community.
I have a question about the county fair. The county fair doesn't draw around the state. I went to it last year on a Saturday night, and it was packed, and it was all local people from the Central Highlands. Do they get funding from us?
They have gotten a TAC grant in the past. I do not believe they did this past year. Is that correct? They did not apply this past year, but they have in the past.
Okay. But if they applied, they would get some funding?
They'd be considered, I would assume.
Yeah, under this new policy, because I really think we need to support the county fair. Even if they don't bring in tourists from all over the place, it's good for the county. Thank you.
That's actually though something that I get concerned about when we go, this is an event we should support, because that leads us away from an objective standard to like a council preference. So I think that we need to have a standard and an application process that goes more towards objective. And if they apply and they meet the criteria, then yes. But us saying like, oh, we like these people, therefore they should get funded, I would be in disagreement with that.
If I can suggest a thought related to sort of the thinking behind the policy, and this is a policy question, so certainly in the realm of council, but the signature events we look at as ones that are really anchors for our brand, right? And so we refer to them in marketing terms because that's how people get to know who we are. That's how people decide they're going to come here, is because they're going to come to the rodeo or to Christmas City or to Whiskey Off-Road. Those are some of our biggest events that form those sort of pillars of our identity. The other events that go through the TAC process are emerging, right? They're trying to make an event work, and they're serving local folks, and sometimes they're serving visitors. And the question behind that for council is whether we want a policy that is built on providing more and more funding to events as they grow, or whether we're trying to encourage events to become self-reliant and sustainable on their own so that they don't need significant government funding to operate in the future. Either answer could be right, but we focused on the major events because they actually give something, like it's a big branding boost for us, right? It's a marketing relationship, just like we might sponsor another event to get our brand out there. Some of the smaller events aren't at that sort of level yet, where they have the million impressions and all that kind of stuff. And so the thought with them has been, yeah, let them come and get TAC grants. Let them try, let them put on a great event, let them serve who they can serve. But in the long term, we're hoping that they're so successful that they don't need us anymore. Now, if we need to change that so that we're doing more and more funding over time, we can do that too. That's up to council.
I'd be curious how you look at the Cowboy Poets Gathering in that structure.
I think Cowboy Poets is a smaller event that can apply for TAC grants when they need them. Yeah, and
Any more comments? Lois?
Yeah, I liked that word signature events because they are, if I look at the special events tiers or later on, where does special event sponsorship happen? We have city events, and but those are not our signatures events. Those are not, it's like city marketing is where our signature events are. And I think we need to introduce some of those terms because people into this policy document, because I don't think people understand when you're coming in and you're aspiring to grow and, how do I become a signature event and what are the benefits of that? So I think we're all using terms that becomes very confusing. And so I was hoping the policy would get clear that you can be a Tier A signature event and be either, you could be a city event or you could be a city marketing event. Or do we really want all of our signatures event to be city marketing events? Because we should in the policy say, we don't want it to be a city event. We'll sponsor you, but we would like it to be that you're going after your own sponsors to pull off your event as this thing grows and flourishes and, So I just think some of those words that we've used in discussions and even today in discussions, I think they need to be in this policy document so it's crystal clear. If that helps. That would help me at least be able to explain this to others.
So you can distinguish between one and the other. It's very important that everyone's speaking the same language.
Yeah, because we're talking Tier A, Tier B, Tier C. Then we have city events, city marketing events, TAC grants. Then we have signature event. I'm like, I choose one from this menu and one from, how do you think about this? So I just think putting some of those words around this would really help us or eliminate some of this lexicon from our mouths because we cause some of the confusion with the different terms.
I do see sometimes we're using them interchangeably, and like city sponsored and city produced are two different things, but in a person's mind, they can meld if it's not really clearly outlined. I also think that this policy would be really good to look at building out these kind of two lower levels of emerging and involving, because I think it's really important that the city develop a constructive relationship with event producers so that they can move up and become signature events, or that they can find their place in kind of the ecology. And I think maybe that's, I know the urgency of this is to be able to show how we're rewarding signature events. I think in the next year it would be interesting to see TAC develop the lower tiers of this policy.
Okay, let's have Mike continue here.
That's all I have. Thank you very
Okay.
much for the feedback. It's very beneficial, and so we will
Okay, we'll
We
have
will
the council.
work on this and bring it back to council
Yeah.
at a future date
Yeah.
at a voting session.
Okay, Mr. Gambogi, did you have any comments about the presentation?
I have nothing.
Okay, Mr. Grady.
Yes, thank you. So next steps is a part of.
I didn't go
part
to the
of-
next steps, did I? I'm sorry. So the next step is for the adoption of a policy, which is what city council will do.
yeah.
And so that'll be on a future voting agenda. And then we're conducting and we'll continue to conduct the economic impact studies of these three signature events. And then we'll apply that funding formula and bring contracts to city council in the new fiscal year for implementation of this policy. And then the TAC grants will continue as they have for many years and follow the same process.
Yeah, thank you.
Mayor?
Mary?
Sorry. Since the policy is going to go back with you, maybe for a little modification of language, but nonetheless, even though the policy has not been voted on yet, I'm assuming we're going to go forward with the economic impact studies for the various events that are coming up that you've discussed earlier. So that is not waiting on the council to give their stamp of approval to this
Correct.
proposed policy.
We have contracted with ASU for those three events to do the studies.
So that's not put on hold pending the policy.
Correct. We wanted to have this policy in place so that once those are done, we can then apply the policy.
Thank you.
Lois?
Do you foresee that any of the learnings out of doing those studies might affect how we think about finalizing this policy?
That's a good question. We will see a study hopefully here very soon, and we can.
Because I hate
see-
to call something final and then 3 or 4 months later say, oops,
Yeah.
this is final now. So I don't know when those studies are coming back for all three of those events, but just a thought.
Sure, no, that's a good thought.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for doing this. Is there any public comment about this topic?
No, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. And I guess our meeting is adjourned.